The cold had teeth that night. It came down from the north without mercy, turning the air sharp enough to sting lungs and freeze breath into clouds that vanished as fast as they formed. The kind of cold that made streetlights seem colder, their yellow glow doing nothing to warm the pavement below. The kind of cold that made you walk faster, shoulders hunched, thinking only of the warmth waiting behind your front door. He was almost to his truck when he saw it, a small shape under the street lamp, dark against the white crust of snow, motionless. At first he thought someone had dropped a mitten, then as he stepped closer, he thought, a kitten, some stray that had wandered too far from shelter and paid the price. But something about the stillness made him stop, made him crouch down, made him look closer. The markings were wrong, too wild, too precise. The ears weren't rounded, they had tufts. The coat wasn't solid, it was spotted, mottled in browns and greys that no domestic breed carried. And when he finally understood what he was looking at, his breath caught. A bobcat, kitten, barely the size of his hand, eyes sealed shut, body curled inward like it had been trying to hold on to warmth that had long since abandoned it. The fur was crusted with frost, the paws were tucked tight against its chest, and when he pressed 2 fingers gently against its ribs, he felt the faintest flutter of life, so faint, he thought he might be imagining it. He didn't think, he just moved. Coat off, kitten wrapped inside, and then he was running through the wind, boots sliding on ice, heart pounding harder than it had in years. The house was dark when he pushed through the front door. He didn't bother with lights, just laid the bundled coat on the kitchen table and carefully peeled back the fabric, exposing the tiny frozen body beneath. For a moment, he just stood there, hands hovering, unsure where to even begin. He'd never done this before, never raised anything wild. Hell, he'd barely managed to keep a cactus alive last year. But the clock was ticking, and this fragile, impossible thing wasn't going to survive the night without help. Heating pad, pulled from the back of the linen closet. Warm towels, rotated every few minutes to keep the heat gentle and steady. A shallow dish of water he warmed between his palms before offering it near the kitten's mouth. He worked slowly, methodically, letting the warmth seep in without shocking the system. Too fast, and the body could shut down. Too slow, and the cold would finish what it started. The bobcat didn't stir, didn't cry, didn't open its eyes. It just lay there, small and still, chest rising and falling in shallow, fragile breaths. He told himself it was temporary. 1 night, maybe 2 at most. Then he'd find a wildlife rescue center, hand it over to professionals who actually knew what they were doing. People trained for this, people who wouldn't be fumbling in the dark with towels and hope. But for now, it was just him and the silence, and the faint, rhythmic sound of something fighting to stay alive. He didn't notice Milo at first. His cat had been watching from the hallway, a shadow in the doorway, ears swiveling toward the sound of rustling fabric and shallow breathing. Milo was a big orange tabby, 15 pounds of lazy affection, the kind of cat who spent his days sprawled across the back of the couch or pressed against the sunny spot on the floor. Not exactly the type to investigate strange noises, not exactly the type to care about anything that didn't involve food or a warm lap. But now Milo was moving, slow, deliberate, paws silent on the tile as he crept closer to the table, nose twitching as he caught the scent of something unfamiliar, something that didn't belong. The man's stomach tightened. Milo, no, but Milo didn't stop. He hopped onto the chair, then onto the table itself, lowering his head toward the bundle of towels. His body language was calm, curious, even, but the man's pulse spiked. This was a wild animal. Predator DNA, claws, teeth, instincts hardwired for survival. And Milo was leaning in like it was just another housemate. Then Milo did something the man would never forget. He began to groom. Not a cautious sniff, not a warning. Hiss, grooming. Long, careful strokes of his tongue across the bobcat's frozen ears. The kind of grooming mother cats give their newborns. The kind that says, "You're safe, you're mine, I've got you." The man stood frozen, barely breathing, watching as Milo settled down beside the bobcat and tucked himself in close. His purr started low and steady, a deep rumble that filled the quiet kitchen like a heartbeat. And the bobcat, still unconscious, still barely clinging to life, shifted slightly, pressing into the warmth of Milo's body. It didn't make sense. Cats were territorial, cautious. They hissed at strange cats through windows. They arched their backs at the sight of dogs. But here was Milo, soft, spoiled, domesticated Milo, curled around a wild creature, treating it like kin he'd been waiting his whole life to find. The man sank into the chair across from them, hands gripping the edge of the table. Why would a domestic cat instantly adopt a wild predator that should have terrified him? There was no answer, no logic, just Milo's tail wrapping loosely around the bobcat's hind legs, just the steady rise and fall of two bodies breathing in sync. And somewhere deep in the silence, the bobcat let out the smallest sound. Not a cry, a purr. The man didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the chair, watching them, checking the bobcat's breathing every few minutes, adjusting the heating pad, making sure Milo didn't accidentally smother the fragile thing he'd decided to protect. The hours blurred together, midnight, 2 a.m., 4, marked only by the ticking of the kitchen clock and the soft rhythm of Milo's purring. By the time dawn light crept through the window, the bobcat's color had returned. Its paws were warmer, its ears no longer stiff with frost, and Milo hadn't moved once, hadn't stopped purring, hadn't stopped keeping watch. The man looked at them, two creatures who should never have met, curled together like they'd been waiting for this moment their entire lives, and felt something shift inside his chest. Just one night asterisk, he'd told himself, but watching them now, something told him that promise was already broken. Morning came quiet. The man woke slumped in the kitchen chair, neck stiff, the pale light of dawn spilling across the table. For a moment, he'd forgotten where he was. Then he saw them. Milo was still there, curled tight around the bobcat, like a living blanket. But something had changed overnight. The bobcat's breathing was stronger now, deeper, steadier. Its tiny paws twitched as it stretched, claws flexing against the towel, and when it shifted in its sleep, Milo adjusted immediately, tucking himself closer, never breaking contact. The man exhaled slowly. It had survived the night. Over the next few days something unexpected unfolded. Milo became the bobcat's full-time guardian, not just a companion, a protector. He brought toys to its makeshift bed, dropping them gently beside the kitten's head. When the bobcat cried, soft, high-pitched mews that sounded too wild to come from something so small, Milo answered with loud, insistent meows, as if translating between two worlds. And during naps, Milo never left. He curled around the bobcat, warming it with his body, purring until the wild kitten's breathing slowed and deepened into sleep. The man tried separating them once, just to be safe. He moved the bobcat to a crate in the spare room, gave Milo his usual spot on the couch. Within an hour, Milo was scratching at the door, crying like he'd lost something vital. The man gave up, opened the door, watched as Milo trotted straight to the crate, squeezed himself inside, and resumed his post. By the end of the week, the bobcat was eating solid food, small pieces of chicken at first, then more. It began teething on furniture legs, batting at dangling strings, learning to walk with wobbly but determined steps. And Milo, patient, gentle Milo, taught it house cat manners. Head bumps, slow blink greetings, soft paw taps, instead of claws. But the wildness never disappeared. The bobcat pounced with precision no domestic kitten could match. It climbed curtains with ease, perched on high shelves, watched the world with eyes that tracked movement like prey. And when it played, there was something different in the way it moved, something instinctive, ancient, untamed.
The man watched it one evening, crouched low on the carpet, stalking a toy mouse. Milo had nudged toward it. The bobcat's body coiled, muscles tense, then exploded forward in a blur of spotted fur and sharp focus. Milo sat nearby, tail flicking, watching with what looked almost like pride, and the man realized something he'd been avoiding for days. This isn't temporary anymore. He hadn't called the rescue center, hadn't even looked up the number, because every time he thought about it, he pictured Milo's face when the bobcat was gone. He pictured the empty space on the couch, the toys left untouched. Something beautiful was unfolding here, something he didn't want to end. 3 weeks in, the bobcat had doubled in size. Its legs lengthened, its paws thickened. The soft kitten fur gave way to a sleeker coat, spotted and dense, built for something far beyond living room floors. And when it played now, the game had changed. Play fighting with Milo became rougher. The bobcat pounced harder, bit with more pressure, wrestled with a strength that made the man wince. But Milo never flinched, never hissed, never backed away. He met every tackle with patience, every nip with a gentle paw to the face, as if reminding the wild kitten, "Easy, I'm still here." But the man could see it. The bobcat was outgrowing this house, outgrowing safety, outgrowing the life Milo had given it. He made the call on a Sunday morning. The wildlife rehab center listened to his story: rescue, survival, the unexpected bond with a house cat. They were kind, professional, and their answer was clear. The bobcat was healthy enough now, strong enough. It was time to begin the transition, back to the wild. The man hung up and stared at the phone in his hand. He knew they were right. He'd always known this day would come. But knowing didn't make it easier. Because letting go meant breaking something. Something Milo had built with every purr, every grooming session, every night spent curled protectively around a creature that should have been a stranger. He built an enclosure in the yard, larger, open to the sky, platforms for climbing, hiding spots, room to stalk and leap, and practice being what it was born to be. The bobcat explored it fearlessly, nose to the air, ears swiveling at every sound. It climbed the high platforms with ease, crouched low in the tall grass he'd planted, stalked insects with focused intensity. Every movement was precise, instinctive, wild. But every evening, as the sun set, the bobcat pressed against the glass door leading back inside, watching, waiting, looking for Milo. Inside, Milo paced the hallway. He cried softly at the door, paws reaching under the gap, trying to reach what he could no longer protect. And the man sat between them, caught in the space where love and nature collided. Is returning him to the wild the right thing, even if it breaks both their hearts? He didn't have an answer. He only knew that the stronger the bobcat became, the harder this decision felt. Because doing what was right didn't always feel like mercy. Sometimes it just felt like loss. Spring came quietly. The bobcat was powerful now, confident, undeniably wild. Its coat gleamed in the sunlight, muscles rippling beneath spotted fur as it moved through the enclosure, with the grace of something that belonged to the forest, not a backyard. The man and Milo walked the enclosure one last time. The bobcat approached, nuzzling against Milo's side, then pressing its forehead to the man's hand. A moment of connection, a goodbye neither of them wanted. Then, with wildlife staff supervising from a distance, the gate opened. The bobcat paused at the threshold, looked back once, then stepped into the trees and disappeared. The house felt empty. Milo wandered from room to room crying softly, a sound the man had never heard from him before. He checked the enclosure, sat by the glass door, waited for something that wasn't coming back. The man worried he'd made a terrible mistake. Weeks passed. Then one evening, while reviewing footage from the trail camera he'd mounted near the tree line, the man saw something that made his breath catch. There at the edge of the woods stood the bobcat. Bigger now, healthier than ever, coat thick and wild, eyes sharp and alert. It stood watching the house, utterly still, like it had walked all this way just to check on something it couldn't forget. And then faint, barely audible on the audio, two soft meows, responding to Milo's cries from the porch. The man opened the door. Milo stepped outside, ears forward, tail high. The bobcat didn't approach fully, didn't cross back into the world it had left behind, but it stepped close enough for Milo to reach forward and touch noses. One last time. They stayed like that for a moment. Two creatures connected by something deeper than species, deeper than instinct. Then the bobcat turned and slipped back into the shadows. But it didn't vanish. Not completely. Just because over the months that followed, the trail camera captured more visits. Brief, silent. The bobcat watching from the woods, checking in, making sure the bond it had formed still held. And Milo standing on the porch, waiting, not sad anymore, just certain. The man looked at the footage one night,
Milo curled beside him on the couch and smiled. The bobcat had stayed only one night, but it had left a bond that would last a lifetime.